Oh, welcome back to Poetry Lockdown. We are at day 317. Um, so, as you know, I like to put poems in conversation with each other. Sometimes that is deliberate, like I plan it out in my head. I'm going to do this one, I'm going to do that one. Sometimes it's really organic. It just comes from my reading. I was reading last time this terrific Miller Williams poem of history and hope. It was an inaugural poem. It just so happened that as I was doing my morning reading of poems from this wonderful anthology, which I know I've showed like a bunch of times last month, "The Light of the World Was Subdued," our songs came through, edited by Joy Harjo, I just featured recently too. I stumbled across a poem that said "After Miller Williams," and then I just started reading it, and it really stopped me in my tracks. It's called Chief Totopotamoi, 1654. I hope I'm getting that right. And I wasn't sure exactly which poem of Miller Williams it was after, but when I was thinking about it this week, that closing stanza from his inaugural poem really feels like it's talking to this poem. So I'm going to read just the last couple of lines out loud, and then talk about and read this poem by Karen Wood, and see if you see any connections or conversations between the poems. So this is from Miller Williams' poem that I read earlier in the week. At the end of the poem, he says, "All this in the hands of children, eyes already set on a land we never can visit. It isn't there yet. But looking through their eyes, we can see what our long gift to them may come to be. If we can truly remember, they will not forget." In the title of the poem is "Of History and Hope." And there's something really beautiful about that remembering is an intentional act, and doing that is actually grounds for hope for the future. And so Karen Wood definitely, she passed away just last year, or 2019, um, of the Monacan tribe. I hope I'm getting that right. Definitely a poet very much invested in history. And she writes a poem which has a really fascinating history. It's 14 lines. So in some ways you could consider it kind of like a sonnet, or in the sonnet tradition. And the title, Chief Totopotamoi, and I did some research this week about sort of him and Virginian history, and if I get any of this wrong, those of you who are real history buffs correct me. But from what I understand, he was of a particular tribe, the Pamunkey tribe, that was working with the English settlers to try to get another native tribe, which I can't pronounce, and I can put a link in there, um, to leave this particular part of land. So he was basically collaborating with the English settlers, and at one point, Chief Totopotamoi was fighting with the white settlers, the English settlers, against this other tribe, and the English settlers pulled back and left Chief Totopotamoi and his tribe to fight against the other native tribe, and they were overwhelmed, and he was killed. And so this poem is written from the point of view of that other tribe, I believe, from those other tribe members. So it's kind of got like that plural we voice. It's really interesting, and like I said, I feel like it names the awkward, embarrassing part of American history in a really profound way. So I'm going to read it aloud now after that convoluted intro that may have had inaccuracies. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But this poem opened up just a lot of just thinking, reflecting, and seeing historically. I found it really valuable. Chief Totopotamoi, 1654, after Miller Williams. This is to say, we continued, as though continuing changed us, as though continuing brought happiness as we had known. On a dry field without cover, his skin blistered raw in the sun. Not one among us came, as though he had no relations. What did we say to our brother? How could we leave him alone while soldiers guarded his corpse as though precious to them. One of the women in darkness crept to the field where he died, prayed for him, covered him up, dust over what was not dust. We would have ventured out with her if we had loved ourselves less. We had to think of our children, and he was not coming back. How could we live with the silence, live with our grief and our shame? Death did not heal what he suffered. He was making demands. We did not want him to be there, asking the question he asked us, changing the sound of his name. He had embarrassed us. This is the memory we carried, avoiding the thought that he remained face down among the charred grasses, holding the earth with his hands. If you're joining me, that was Chief Totopotamoi, 1654, by Karenne Wood. Like I said, it's 14 lines, and there's so much there. I think one of the things that I admire most about this poem, and it scares me to talk about it because I think I'm not going to say anything intelligent, is just how much is compressed into such a small package of language. So when you read sonnets, people talk about sort of the turn in the sonnet where kind of like things radically shift. And there's different kind of traditional points in the sonnet on a certain line. It feels like for me, the turning point happened kind of about the midpoint of the poem. Whereas there's a lot of questioning up and through those first 6 lines, and then there's a woman crept to the field where he died, prayed for him, covered him up. And these other people are watching that woman do it and saying why they wouldn't do it, or we had to think of these other things. And then there's this deep embarrassment of just what has happened with this moment in history that to me is kind of like at the heart or essence of this poem. We did not want him to be there, asking the question he asked us, changing the sound of his name. And I think the closing lines of the poem really speak to, I think, Miller Williams, this idea of, I want to look at that line again because I feel like I said at the beginning, this is kind of in conversation with that. If we can truly remember, they will not forget. It seems to me like this idea of carrying memory is at the heart of this poem as well. The closing lines really hit home for me. This is the memory we carried, avoiding the thought that he remained face down among the charred grasses, holding the earth with his hands. And there's this deep irony that, like, the most powerful line of the poem is an image that the speakers refuse to imagine or acknowledge. That's about all I got on this poem. Like I often say at the end of these, I would love to hear your thoughts. It's been really cool seeing comments in the Facebook chat or YouTube chat. So please feel free to do that. Thank you, Karenne Wood, for this beautiful poem. Beautiful, maybe it is beauty. It's a terrible beauty, but thank you for not looking away from history. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have a good Friday and good rest of your weekend.